So we have the first week in January, and after a relatively explosive press conference on Sunday, Ruben Amorim of Manchester United was sacked on Monday. Now, of course, this is massive news in football. First of all, it's Manchester United, and second of all, I don't think many people saw this coming. Yes, he's obviously one of the worst managers in United's recent history in terms of his win rate. I mean, yeah, I don't know how bad United could get under him, but it was crazy. To also lose a UEFA Europa League final to that Tottenham team, so it's not a surprise in the sense of how United have been doing, although I feel like they have improved slightly this season. But what I couldn't get my head around with Ruben Amorim is when they played Grimsby in the Carabao Cup and he rested players. And you think, why are you resting players when you haven't got European football? I didn't get that. And he was under pressure at that point as well. I mean, that's modern football for you. A Carabao Cup, a League Cup is not going to save your job. But when you're under pressure, you want to make sure you win every game. Now, of course, they could have played their strongest 11 and still gone out to Grimsby. But, I don't know, taking a massive risk and going out. So, I think from the football side, the sacking wasn't... I don't think it was a surprise, but I think the way it's come about with the press conference he gave after the Leeds game, and then obviously the sacking yesterday. So it's obviously massive news. This is modern day football. I think the news broke around 9:30 in the morning, and it was still breaking news at 7 p.m. on Sky Sports News. I mean, Jesus, breaking news it's just broken. This is, later in the day. But I've been reading a lot about Manchester United over the years because they are one of the most interesting clubs in English football. And I know obviously people will have their difference of opinions, but their history is quite, it is quite amazing. It explains why they are one of the biggest clubs in the world, even though from a footballing sense they are essentially back to a cup team. They're miles away from the league. And if you know your United history, then you should see comparisons to an earlier period of United history. So let's go back a little bit just to understand. Now, this shouldn't be news to anyone if you are a Manchester United supporter, but it obviously I'm just going to cover a bit because there are people who may not fully understand. So up until the end of the Second World War, so 1945, United were not exactly one of the biggest teams. They weren't. They'd won a title under Ernest Magnell pre-First World War, but by the 1930s, they were an average team. I mean, they were one game away from relegation to Division 3 at the time, which is now League 1, and only a victory over Millwall kept them in the second division, which is obviously now the Championship. They did end the 1930s back in the first division, and there were signs of recovery. But what really made Manchester United kind of brought it into what we know of Manchester United is the appointment of Sir Matt Busby in 1945. So he took on a team. Now, he was responsible for signings, literally everything. And he was kind of one of the first, what they call tracksuit managers. He got out on the training ground because he was a mid-30s at the time. So he wasn't, an old man. He was getting out with the players. And he built his first successful team at United. So they won the FA Cup in 48 and they would win the league title in 52. They were runners-up on numerous occasions. And then, obviously, came the Busby Babes. So, youngsters, Duncan Edwards, Eddie Coleman. Now, they weren't all, United like to give off the impression that they were all, completely come through a youth system, but obviously from different parts of the country. But, Tommy Taylor was signed for a record, just £1 under 30,000 at the time. Obviously, they got all these youngsters in. But basically, it was something that hadn't really been seen in English football before. And obviously, this team won 2 league titles. They were going for a third. They weren't guaranteed to win the third by the time the Munich air crash happened, because Wolves, were up there with them, and Wolves were a big team at the time. But obviously then came Munich. So the Munich air disaster, Manchester United flying back via Munich from their quarter-final against Partizan Belgrade, and unfortunately the plane crashed and quite a few players died, and even those that survived, some never played again. So Matt Busby needed to build another team, and obviously this time, it took a couple of years, but he obviously built a team around survivor Bobby Charlton, people like Bill Fulks who survived, and then obviously you had your Dennis Law and George Best, Nobby Stiles, and a number of other players. So this team would win FA Cup, a couple of league titles, and of course the Holy Grail, which again elevated United to one of the biggest teams in England, the 1968 European Champions Club Cup. Now, Matt Busby initially stepped down towards the end of the 1968-69 season. So he'd been in charge from 1945 to 1969, and obviously was at that point the most successful manager of Manchester United, and arguably would have won more if the Munich air crash hadn't have happened. But what then happened from 69 to essentially 1990, although Ferguson came in 86, was United became a cup team. So Wilf McGuinness, reserve team coach, had the first crack, but he was never really given any authority. So Matt Busby, who's now Sir Matt Busby, was still there. His influence was absolutely massive. So Wilf McGuinness lasted, I think, less than the season. Frank O'Farrell came in. Then Tommy Docherty. At this point, United got relegated to the second division, obviously the Championship. They were back after one season. The late 70s, they get into cup finals. They lost to Southampton in 76, beat Liverpool in 77. Tommy Docherty's then sacked because he's having an affair with the wife of the physio. Dave Sexton comes in, gets United to another cup final, but they lose to Arsenal. Then Ron Atkinson comes in. Again, cup winners in 83 and 85, but there's no league success. They don't get anywhere near the league. You could argue that one season under Docherty, they were close, and Sexton got United to second, but they were never really in the league title. So they became a cup team. The influence of Busby was massive, especially in the kind of in the 70s period. He was essentially shunted aside in the 80s, but he had a massive influence. Sometimes, and early on especially, on transfers. It's not to say that Wilf McGuinness or Frank O'Farrell would have got everyone they wanted, but some of them were vetoed by Sir Matt Busby. And of course, if you're a player who's grown up with Sir Matt Busby as your manager, then, you're going to see him as the ultimate. But then came Sir Alex Ferguson. So he builds the next United dynasty. Obviously, he just about survived. And then from 1990 to 2013, he did not stop. And a bit like Busby, he didn't just create one team. He created three, really. You had your first kind of team that was built around Pallister, Bruce, kind of Ince, Hughes, Schmeichel, and obviously the introduction of Cantona in 92. So they were winning things like, the first Premier League titles, a League Cup in 92, FA Cups, the double in 94, 96. And then that period around 95, 96, you had the kids coming in, so the class of 92. So your Beckhams, your Nevilles, Scholes, but people like that. So then you have that treble winning season, 99. Arsenal have obviously briefly threatened United on, within that period. And then comes Chelsea with their money in the early 2000s. So again, Ferguson has to build a third team, the Tevez, Ronaldo, Rooney. Now obviously these teams took a number of years to build, but obviously that team would win 3 Premier League titles in a row. It would make 2 Champions League finals in a row, winning one of them, and obviously a third Champions League final in 2011. But again, Ferguson, like Busby, obviously had to build it with success, but had control over everything. So when the Glazers came in 2005, they effectively left Ferguson and David Gill, to do what they needed to do on the football side. Yes, the way Glazers bought the club, everything, that's a completely separate story, but they didn't interfere with it too much. So the manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, had the players that he could want. And if you look at United signings in that kind of 2005 period to 2013, there wasn't many duds in it. There was quite a few. Bebe is one of them that sticks out, but a lot of the signings made were really good. But then in 2013, Sir Alex Ferguson retired. And this is where, to me, history of Manchester United repeats itself. They've gone through Moyes, Van Gaal, Mourinho, Solskjaer, Ten Hag, Ruben Amorim. They've had Ralph Rangnick as interim. They've had Giggs as interim. And there's probably 1 or 2 others, Van Nistelrooy as well. And United have reverted to type. A cup-winning team. Since 2013, when they last won the league title, United have not been involved in a title race whatsoever. They came second under Mourinho, but that was a distant second. They were never threatening City. They did win the Europa League and the League Cup in that season, and Community Shield as well. Well, very rubbish treble. But United have essentially repeated their history. Now, you could argue, Christian, that's not the same. The managers have come and gone in different ways, etc. Yeah, I get that. But what I'm getting at here is United twice have had one manager who has ruled the club from top to bottom. Sir Matt Busby, 45 to 69. Sir Alex Ferguson, 86 to 2013. And those influences of Sir Matt Busby when he left the first time, and Sir Alex Ferguson when he left in 2013, they don't leave the club. They don't just walk away. They are still heavily influencing. Not so much now for Sir Alex Ferguson, but in those early years, who brought Cristiano Ronaldo back to United? I'm not saying Sir Alex Ferguson was the only person who wanted that, but he was a driver in it. And it's very difficult, once you've had one hell of a successful manager, like Sir Alex Ferguson, for them to be sitting up in the stands and you're the manager and you're always going to be compared to him. We're in 2026 and people still talk like United should be winning Premier League titles. Now, an interesting comparison here, if you think, well, Christian, I think you're talking rubbish, is look at Liverpool. Whether you agree or not, I think it played some part in their success. So Bill Shankly, 1959 he came into Liverpool. And again, Liverpool were a little bit like United at this point in terms of they'd won titles before, but they weren't a massive club. In fact, Liverpool spent most of the 50s in the second division, the Championship. But Shankly changed Liverpool. Regardless of what you feel about Liverpool, Shankly changed Liverpool, the football club. And he built title-winning teams. He won their first FA Cup. And he was massive. And he was building a second team in the early 70s. They would win the title, the UEFA Cup, and the FA Cup as well. But he retired in 1974. Quite unexpectedly. I don't think anyone was expecting it. It's one of the big, if we think Amorim's sacking today was massive, Shankly retiring after the 74 FA Cup was just probably even bigger because he'd been there for so long. And Bob Paisley took over. But Bill Shankly kept going back to Liverpool in that first season. And again, a bit like Manchester United under Busby, and under Sir Alex, the players who'd been managed by them, and obviously in Liverpool's case by Shankly, still looked to him as the boss. So it was difficult for Paisley, trying to stamp his authority on the club and the team when you still got Bill Shankly walking in, around the training area at Melwood. And Liverpool made the decision to basically say, the board say, Shankly, go. You're not welcome back here anymore. Just go. Now, from a human point of view, considering all the Shankly gave, that's quite harsh. But it allowed Paisley to do what he needed to do then. So Shankly ended up actually watching Everton a lot more, going to their training, Tranmere. He even recommended, I think it was Lou Macari, to United. Steve Coppell to United, because if you think about the rivalry between Liverpool and United these days, Steve Coppell was a youngster at Tranmere. And Shankly had actually asked Liverpool, do you come and take a look at him? He's a good player. And Liverpool said no. So Shankly rings up United, Tommy Docherty, and says, come and have a look at him. But by removing Shankly, while on a human level it's not the nicest, it allowed Paisley to do what he needed to do and get his authority, along with his backroom staff, the famous boot room, Joe Fagan, Ronnie Moran, to get that Liverpool team to the next level, which of course they did. They set English football on fire, league titles, European Champions Club Cups, overtook Manchester United in terms of, winning the European Champions Club Cup. So, bringing it back to the Ruben Amorim sacking, while football has definitely changed, because remember, Ferguson got 3 years before he was under severe pressure. So that 1989-90 season obviously ended up winning the FA Cup and kept his job. These days, as United have shown, Van Gaal, Ten Hag, you win an FA Cup, it barely buys you any time. Van Gaal didn't buy him any time, and Ten Hag, it bought him a couple of months. But United are going through the same. And I think, I'm not saying it will be exactly, 20 odd years before they win another title, but you can see the comparisons between what had happened at United previously and what's happening now. Even if the way the people are leaving, how football has changed, I think the basics are still there, and United are repeating their history. Now, whether you agree or disagree, it's completely up to you. Football is all about debate. But I just wanted to give, as the first video, that bit of context, because I think it's quite important that you need to understand a club's history, and then you can see patterns repeat. So I'll leave this one there, just for that, for you to ponder and think, well, he might have a point, he might not. But I think it is quite interesting that, as I say, you've had one highly successful manager and then years of struggle. You then have another highly successful manager for a long period and then years of struggle. I don't think it's coincidence. So there we go. That's a little bit of football history for United and Liverpool, to give them a bit of something behind the Ruben Amorim sacking, rather than just, but the tactics he played and the people he signed and this, because that happened last week and that happened last year and he did that press conference on Sunday. This just gives you that bit more of a rounded historical view. And over the coming weeks and months, I will do more videos. As I say, I have got a book out called Sleepwalking to a Super League, and it's the history of how the European Champions Club Cup and the UEFA Champions League is merging and forming the Super League that we all argued against in 2021. But we're so caught up in the now. Who's playing next? What was the result yesterday? What did they say in the press conference? How many goals has this person scored? How many have they not scored, etc. We're caught up in the now. And it becomes worse each year we go because of social media, because of rolling sports news, because everything has to be breaking news. Literally everything has to be breaking news. So I hope you found this video informative. I'll drop a link in the comments below to my book, Sleepwalking to a Super League. And I will be doing more of these videos, and we'll be looking at all aspects of English football, and European football. And of course, when we get to the World Cup, we'll look at the World Cup as well. But we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.